With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to ZOE's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. All right, welcome friends and allies to the Exploring More podcast with Michael Thompson. I am he, and I'm hanging out with my good friend S.J. Jennings, who is always on the podcast with me. I think everyone, man. That's awesome. Yep. We've been hanging out a lot the last couple of years, exploring the kingdom together. And today we are Zooming as well as podcasting with our friends and teammates, Jeff and Dana Andrechyn. They are part of the guide team for the Rendezvous Project. And so SJ and Sherry and Robin and I did an episode or two on redemptive marriage and the Rendezvous Project and why we loved it so much. We just knew we needed to get the rest of the team, Dana and Jeff, to enter into that conversation. So many things have evolved, right, SJ, in just a couple weeks. 160 some couples are on the launch team. They're giving feedback and entering in. The participant guide has gone to print, and just many pieces of the Rendezvous Project. It feels like the punch list, just before you get to move in. Or it feels like, on the other hand, the contractions just before the real here, she, or he comes, right?
You familiar with those, Michael?
No, I've been on the sidelines for three of those. Cheering is nerve-wracking enough, being the cheerleader. So I can't imagine playing in that game. But
she squeezed my hand so hard during childbirth, I think she broke one of my fingers.
You got a war wound, huh? So this podcast series about marriage and about this resource that we felt compelled to scale, to offer to more than just the couples who could make one of our rendezvous retreats. So here we are on the eve, really, of that being given to the world. And we get to keep talking about it, even off recording. It was so fun to do. And yet it's such a hard thing to do. It's got its challenges, and we have walked with God in that the best that we could to navigate some of those creative things.
But I just wanted to bring up, Michael, that, back when this was still mostly a concept, the Rendezvous Project, we had the opportunity to sit down with John Eldridge and kind of talk with him about it and just kind of catch up with him. We told him we were going into this endeavor to go after marriage and redemptive marriage. And he's like, "Are you sure?" Because of the enormous warfare, the spiritual warfare that surrounds marriage in our world. So like you said, the ship is leaving the dock for the horizon, and we don't really know what destinations it's going to show up on, or we just know we're going to see. So we'll see what happens.
With my most adventurous friend, Jeff Andrechyn, who loves the explorers and is an explorer himself, I really feel like, SJ, that ship came to port by even creating. We went to a land far away and creating it. The Rendezvous Project brought it into harbor, and now we are reloading for distribution now. We are getting to take these things that we found and the things that we have shared as couples. So Jeff and Dana, you guys have been with me and Robin, the Rendezvous weekends. Yeah, just give a little bit of your Rendezvous, the Boone houses history, if you would.
I actually have a thought about memories of the first time we were at the Rendezvous weekend. It was at Sugar Mountain in Boone, and we had all of these mountain lodges that we stayed at. And I loved the small setting and the intimacy and the opportunity to really get to know couples that you were with that weekend. I'm saying that because with this Rendezvous Project that we're releasing, we want more than just a few lodgefuls of people to be able to experience this weekend. And yet I still like the idea that it would be small and intimate and that you would do it with a group of people.
Right.
And so I think this Rendezvous Project is the perfect setup to continue to have small gatherings with maybe people that you're journeying through life with in your marriages. So I just like that idea. I like the small, not the hundreds and thousands in the crowd.
Yeah. Jeff, and I want you to share too, but I also want you to respond to this because Dana, one of my greatest fears and concerns about this is it becomes academic.
Mm-hmm.
That it becomes a program versus an invitation to a porch, an invitation to a living room, an invitation to a fire, that the environments we at ZOE so believe in the set table or the fire pit and the living room, the porch, and where you go through this is as important as to how you go through this.
Yeah.
And that it not be an academic voyage or an academic exploration, but rather a community, a conversation, that this is to facilitate, as you do so well, Dana, this is to set the table for friendship and conversation and exploration with your spouse and with other couples. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, I remember the first time going up there, driving up there and going, tell me again, we're on the speaking team here? Because when you look at our marriage, it is the tragic yet beautiful life of Jeff and Dana Andrechyn. And so I look at the speaking team and I look at Michael and Rob and I go, okay, I get it, but then it goes downhill pretty quick from there. You look at SJ, who's
on the downhill side,
who was married, divorced, but like SJ likes to say, his divorce didn't work out, remarried. You look at the trauma that we've gone through in our marriage, and then you go down the team and you go, wow, this is a real good cross section of marriages presented from a heartfelt way, not in a professional way. There's just no way, Michael, it would go to a program because these are just people. It's almost like you get to listen in on private conversations about their life and their marriage.
Yeah. And it's like you said, literally some pretty sad private conversations, some heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, when we think about what's shared there in the Rendezvous Project. We've heard that, SJ, from some of the couples that are responding to the early showings and the early viewings, right? Like, I can't believe you guys are so vulnerable. I can't believe you're telling the stories of your sons and daughters and the times that our marriages were thin and being so attacked and under attack. I think back, you guys, because you've done this, all of you, and with Robin and I for years, that we would get phone calls from our home fronts that are figuratively on fire.
Right.
Every Rendezvous project, there was that element of the other side of the hill. Jeff, some of the stories that we could tell the next year, but because you were in them, you didn't want to talk about them.
Right.
You had to address them from afar, but it just was so opposed, like you said, like John Eldridge said, like you mentioned, SJ. Yeah. So I love that about the speaker team being not professional marriages, but still amateur, right? In so many ways.
Yeah. 1 year before we were coming up, maybe it wasn't a rendezvous, but it could have been. We had a really tough situation with one of our kids and all hell broke loose. We had people flying in from another state, 2 different families coming in from another state, and a shotgun was involved.
Shotgun came out. Yeah.
We're like, can we leave right now?
Yeah. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
So having come out with this product, I looked at a few other marriage seminars online just to see what else was out there. And one of the impressions I get right away is these people are good. They're great speakers and they're professionals. And you have a tendency to look at those professionals and going, well, sure, their marriage should be perfect because they work on it all the time and they're professionals. Well, when you watch our product, there's no way you would think any of us are professionals. And it really eliminates any excuses you have because we are just like you.
Yeah, the distance between us and the audience is...
We are right there with you. We are in this together, but we have found a way to overcome in Christ, and we're sharing that.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about, Jeff, is when you hear someone that's very polished and professional, as you referred to them, it's hard to relate to that person. And if you can't relate to the person that you're listening to and looking towards for help and teaching, if you can't relate, then there's very little chance that you have hope that there's a way for you to come up out of whatever turmoil you're in, either as an individual or as a couple.
Right.
And so as I'm hearing you share that, that's what's coming to my mind is that the way that we've talked about marriage in the Rendezvous Project makes us relatable. We're vulnerable as we're sharing.
Yeah.
that gives people hope for their marriage. As a matter of fact, when Sherry and I think I shared this during the Rendezvous Project, when we first shared our story in front of a large crowd about our divorce not working out, we divorced and got remarried to each other and talked about all the issues that kind of led up to that. As soon as that moment was over in front of this church, this couple came walking up to us and said, "We're nowhere near as messed up as you two were, so there must be hope for us." You know,
So, glad we could help, right?
Well, if you look at the incarnation, God leaves the heavens and puts on flesh and comes down and is a carpenter. And when he starts his ministry, he's walking around pretty much homeless. Well, that's a pretty approachable guy.
Right.
And I think that was us.
Right.
Yeah. When I think about the Rendezvous Project history and I think of you guys, the Andrechens, Dana, we have to go back. We have to go all the way back to when you two invited Robin and I.
Mm.
Do you remember that story?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And could you share a little bit about that history? You really let us come into your redemptive marriages, your redemptive community, the spaces. Yeah. Anyway, would you tell a little bit of that story? Because
It was back in like 1985. It feels like it. It feels like it, kind of. But Jeff had this great idea that we would invite you out to this place that I worked at called the Forge. It was a big old house with a great room, and that we would invite you and Robin out to maybe do an evening talking about marriage. And so you said yes to that. You, Michael Thompson. And on the way, you told her what you all were going to be doing that evening. And I just remember she was like, "We're what? We're doing what?"
The car, right, Michael? I mean, you got her in the car. You're on the way.
Yeah.
Then you
lock the doors. We were coming up the mountain. I said, "Hey, hon, by the way, they're going to ask us some questions about our marriage." And she's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, we're going to share a little bit about our marriage." She's like, "Are you kidding? What are you talking about?" So I remember, Jeff, Dana says to Robin, "So do you like speaking?" You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And Robin's like, no, I don't.
And she goes, and I didn't know what we were doing. So I wore my sneakers. I didn't even dress the part. I'm like, she's adorable.
Well, that's when Dana and Robin fell in love as sisters, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's when they became sisters at the hip.
Yeah.
With that shared experience.
That was a great beginning.
Husbands who carry them into, I think this will be good. Oh, man, I'm not sure if this is going to be good. I mean, I hope.
I'll take the person who isn't comfortable about sharing and talking. They're the approachable ones. They're going to be the ones who are honest.
And Dana and Robin are. They're so good in the project itself for that reason. Yeah. Yeah. I literally think of Maximus in Gladiator. When Caesar says, "Maximus, would you take my place?" "No, Caesar, with all my heart, no, I will not." "Then it must be you. Therefore, it has to be you." Right. He says, "Therefore, it has to be you." So I think we have brides that have responded that way. But yet, I love that you guys, you and Robin and others on the team, Dana and Rebecca, just have risen to that. But the need is important.
Yeah.
And the opportunity is mine. And I care enough to put aside some of what I'm comfortable and not comfortable doing and sharing authentically and sharing about our story, our love story. I think that's awesome about both Rob and the team.
One thought is just to finish up before you, is that to do these weekends, for me to be a part of the team that offers, has been God's invitation to me, actually. And it's taken me into looking at how is he at work in my life and in our marriage, and what does he want? And it's been so good for my heart first, honestly, to offer this, and so good to do this with my husband. I love having these opportunities to do this with my husband.
So, Michael, talking about need, you guys sit in a tower up there. You got a little bit more of a 5,000-foot view. You're seeing a lot of things because of how many people that ZOE is connected to. What do you see the need out there right now as in 2021 here after coming off that last year?
That's a great question. When something oppresses a person, a marriage, or a community, or a people, when something oppresses them, I hate that it works this way, but I love that it works this way. When something oppresses a people, that is the most fertile soil for hope. there has to be pain. There has to be suffering. There has to be hurt. Not that you can't be hopeful without that, but the kind of things, the kind of hope that grows when there's pandemic, the kind of hope that has to come when there are still civil rights issues, the kind of hope that arises when there is political tension between my candidate and yours, and yet where and how can we find the hope that we share, that we actually share? And there's not winners and losers, but rather there's this invitation to we. Marriage is an invitation to we, to you and me. And so I believe that, yes, there were those variables before, because we started in 2019. I mean, it's taken all of 18 months to see this from filming to here, look what we made. And so I think, Jeff, that for my heart, and I'd love to hear your response, I think that there is so much discouragement, so much heartache. Filings for divorces have moved into a legitimate increase in many, many, many states in the last quarter of 2020.
Wow.
So, yeah, that being said, I believe, man, I hope some of those filings, some of those attorneys could say, before we do this, I heard of a resource, I heard of something. Robin and I are with a couple. So one quick story, SJ, and I'd love to hear what you guys say to your own question, Jeff. But Robin and I are with this couple, and we're not with them, we're separate with them. And the crazy thing is, for my heart, that saddens me so bad, is they had no premarital conversations and counseling. And they were repeating the same offense in getting divorced. They're having no pre-divorce counseling. They think they were smart enough on the front end, and somehow they think they've learned how to be smart enough on the end. I believe, that this is one of those invitations to hope, because we have lost so much in the last year, in the last months. I mean, we literally lost people. Their bodies have died and they have moved on, and we're moms and dads and grandparents and even the younger. So COVID did a number on hearts, which therefore will do a number in marriage and a number on families and a number in communities. So I believe the environment is so looking for the rain to come to this dry and a bit hopeless space. So got me wound up, Jeff. That's a great question. What do you guys think?
Well, our year started out with obviously leaving a 37-year career.
Because of COVID.
Right. And then we had this amazing cruise that was going to leave Copenhagen and eventually wound up in St. Petersburg. It just started with a lot of loss. And I have been in this game long enough to know, God is up to something here. This is good, because I'm going to agree with what you're saying. The most fertile soil can come on the backside of some serious pain, that this is an invitation to growth. And Dana and I have learned, and this is to Dana's credit, we have learned how to go back to back, swords out in these environments of pain, that, hey, we're together in this. Let's go deeper into Christ. That in the land, there are hills and valleys, but there are springs at the hills and there's water in the valleys also. And it's always an invitation to more. That's not just a slogan at ZOE, we're about more. These are the environments sometimes that God creates for us to go deeper into Him and to press into Him. There is more to Him. And we're stuck at a certain level sometimes. We just get in our routine of doing things. And one of the things I'd like to suggest on a side note to people who are in the routine of marriage is this product that we're putting out, the Rendezvous Project. This offers you an opportunity to get past the routine because it's so interactive. I think that's the thing that sets this product apart from everything else, is you're going to spend time asking questions to your wife that you haven't asked her in a long time.
Yeah.
And this atmosphere provides an opportunity for that third party God to come in on these conversations.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, Michael. I think that this is fertile soil. The boys in the cave of Adullam were in debt, depressed, and generally discontented when they came to David. And in that, they were perfect to find out they were really mighty men, right?
Yeah. And I love that the Rendezvous Project takes couples into that ascent of, do you realize the glory of you two together in this world? And so to invite them to even smell or taste that, Dana, I think is just part of the beauty of the Rendezvous Project. So before you answer, Dana, and then SJ, to Jeff's question, we're going to take a quick break and come back for the rest of the Exploring More podcast with Jeff and Dana Andrechyn and the Rendezvous Project. We'll be right back.
Hey listeners, it's SJ. Just want to give you an update on upcoming events in 2021. You know, the purpose of ZOE Events is to create a safe space where men, women, and couples can encounter God, experience Him in wonderfully intimate ways, and enter into life-changing transformation. We want to invite you to get away with God, unplug from all the noise, the busyness, and the demands of everyday routine, and invite Jesus to take you through your story. The moments or seasons in your life that He wants to heal and restore in order to shape you more fully into who you truly are. That happens over and over again throughout the Bible. Regular folks encounter an incredible God, experience His love, and they are never the same. We have 3 events coming up in 2021. March 18th through the 21st is our Heart of a Warrior Allies Advanced Weekend. April 8th through the 11th is the Women's Deepening Weekend. And then April 29th through May 2nd is the Heart of a Warrior Encounter for Men. Visit zoe.org/events for more information.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson, SJ Jennings, hanging out with the one and only Jeff and Dana. The one and only's Jeff and Dana Andrechyn, part of the Rendezvous Project guide team, talking about the Rendezvous Project. And, Jeff launched this significant question, what are we seeing out there from the tower? What condition are our folks in? How is this resource going to address that? What are we hopeful for in seeing this brought to people's hands and hearts in their marriages? And so, SJ, want to swing at that, and then we'll let Dana.
Yeah. In the first episodes in this series, we talked about this a little bit, and my focus in that conversation was on the proximity of being in quarantine, not being able to go to work, or maybe, enforced early retirement or something along those lines, puts you into proximity with your spouse. You maybe had been using work or other endeavors as a way to sort of avoid the things you needed to talk about in your relationship and avoid the conflict. Jeff, as you're asking that question now too, I'm thinking what I want to encourage people that are listening with is the idea that if you've got something going on or an issue in your marriage or with you as an individual that you've been avoiding, that would be like avoiding a pain signal that you're getting physically in your body. If you've got a toothache, if you ignore that joker long enough, you're getting a root canal or getting a tooth pulled out. So it's like, don't ignore the pain signal that you might be experiencing. And I want to encourage people to enter in with guidance, with counseling, with the Rendezvous Project, and be willing to enter into what it is that's going on and go after some of the pain that you've been experiencing, because it's through the pain, to your point, Jeff and Michael, and it's through the pain, it's through the difficult parts that you're going to find glory. You're going to find rescue. You're going to find redemption. And I think, the soil, before it can receive the seeds for planting, it has to be turned over. It has to be tilled. It has to be, for lack of a better term, I'm not a farmer, but ground up so that it's ready to receive and deliver the nutrients that kind of have been locked away under the soil. That gets unearthed, and then the seeds that are planted can grow. And so there's an opportunity here.
The beautiful reality of that is it happens in relationship.
That's right.
It happens in relationship with God, and it happens in relationship with each other. So where the pain is coming from, the joy can truly come through. And from that,
100%.
So finding what it is, what's in the way. What we promised one day was to love one another till death do us part, right? What happened? In the Rendezvous Project, we want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
What happened between I promise and happily ever after is very real. And you don't need a pandemic. You don't need some of the world events, your world events. There's enough going on there. And I love as you shared that, SJ, I would want everybody to hear in the podcast world that it's not just a resource, Jeff, is it? It's an invitation to walk with us into friendship and a relationship. We have couples that actually want and counselors that want. I mean, there's more. The Rendezvous Project video series itself can be the door, the entry point, the turning over of the soil, the exploration. I mean, if we were going to counsel a couple, we put these sessions together, this would be some of our counsel and teaching. But obviously, counseling needs to be in a conversation and a dialogue.
To your point, if I was going to sit down and counsel a couple now in the area of their marriage, I would say, okay, there's 12 sessions you need to watch before we get together. Then we can talk about the things that got unearthed while you were watching those.
Or at least 2 or 3 at a time, and then check your pulse and temperature, because this is where we believe you need to go. All right, Dia, you're up. All the way back to Jeff's. Yeah, would you share your thoughts, please?
Just thinking about, I guess, 2020, and even for us, my mind's going in a couple different directions here. One thing is we've needed laughter during this season. And I remember we did a Zoom call. It was the Mises, the Jennings, the Andrechys. Do you remember that, SJ? And was it on marriage too? I don't remember the topic of the evening, but after we finished our Zoom call, we hung up. Then we all got back on the Zoom call, us 6 people, us 3 couples, and had a glass of wine together. And we were hooting and hollering and laughing and talking about beet juice. And we had the best time. And we got off of that night, and we're like, we needed that so bad. And that was kind of earlier in the pandemic.
Yeah.
What I discovered with Jeff taking an early retirement, I found myself, and life being turned upside down and plans being canceled and being stuck at home, I found myself over the course of weeks in a mild depression that I just kind of kept for a while. And I found out about this poetry class that was offered online that I was participating in, and the depression wasn't going away. And part of it had to do with, I think, this scarcity mindset that I have. How is life going to work out now that plans have been changed? And it just goes back to my past. And I'm thinking, I am not responding to this rationally. I'm responding to this from a young place, but I can't shake it. So Jeff and I are out walking one day, and I got the courage up to say, I've been in just a mild depression and I'm tearful.
Oh, yeah.
And you just came alongside me so sweetly. I was almost afraid to say it. And you said, well, this is important. What's going on? How can I come alongside you? How can we help? How can I help? And the help for me kind of came in the form of finding this woman who was doing this creative Lectio poetry class. She's a counselor, and her taking me into my past, my little girlness, and how she needed some tending to.
Mm-hmm.
We're living in some awesome territory. Yes, it is still scary to me, but how are we going to do it? How are we going to make it happen? I worry about the future, but just to be able to have somebody walking beside me who doesn't want me to stay in a place of being depressed, but he wants me to go there. And it's been precious.
Yeah, I love that. Talk about orientation as a couple, right? And having, marriage is a 3-legged race. And so
it really is.
When one falls, you can't just drag that partner across the finish line or stand over them like, what are you doing down there? It's so I love that, Dana, about what you've experienced this year. And it's heavy, it's hard. And yet to go back in your story, these are some elements of the Rendezvous Project.
Right.
To invite people back to their story, their love story. But even before that, and begin a journey of tending to some of their past, because it goes down the aisle with them on that day that they say, I do. And if it goes unattended, it will demand, it'll come up.
Yeah. A great metaphor this summer. I mean, not tending to our pain and what it costs. This past summer, I had a really bad stomach, something going on, but I had some girlfriends coming over for a couple days, Robin and Rebecca.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, I think it was something I ate and I think I'm going to be fine. And they come and the pain is a little bit better. Hey, Robin. And then it gets worse throughout the day. And at night when I went to bed, I'm like, I actually think I need to go to the hospital. So I ended up in the emergency room with a burst appendix the next morning, but talk about ignoring your pain.
That's a tough cowgirl right there.
That's a tough. Hey, I needed to party with my friends. But
nothing will prevent that from happening. I can assure you.
But to ignore our pain is just, it'll kill you actually, and it'll kill your relationships.
So SJ, I loved how you brought that imagery of farming and tilling. And I would love to ask you a question. You're the one who probably did more work on this project than anybody else. And Patrick, who I wish was on this with us. As you were going through and putting this together, what surprised you? What did you learn? What did you discover that you didn't know? What was some of the highlights of all that work that you put into this?
It probably comes as no surprise, but, first of all, I would say the finished product is probably about half of the footage that we actually captured. So one of the most difficult parts of my shared responsibility was whittling down the content to an amount that was probably, what people could stomach, one session at a time. So what I mean by that is we tried to keep the sessions to about 35 minutes of time at a maximum. In reality, at the weekend, when we recorded them, they were closer to an hour of content each one. So there's so much of that goodness that, I had to pare away a little bit, thinking of a meal, and you love the food so much that you overeat, and then you're miserable with indigestion or whatnot. And so I didn't want to put the audience in a place where they felt that way, like they had overeaten at a meal, even though the food's good. So paring it down to that manageable size was one of the greatest challenges for sure. But I think more to your question, Jeff, what I kind of experienced during watching them over and over again was just from a teammate perspective, from a ZOE teammate perspective of going through it and listening to Michael and Robin and David and Rebecca and all of the couples that were interviewed for the project. I just loved getting to know everybody more. We're honored and blessed and get to spend a lot of time together as friends, but we all live lives that are full. And so there's a lot of times that we just don't have the bandwidth to spend time together and hear each other's stories as much as we'd like, even though we live that way.
That's how we live.
Especially when you're talking about a dozen couples, that we're involved with either on the guide team or were interviewed for the sessions. So to go through and hear more stories, and I felt like I got to know each one of the individuals in the project a little more intimately, and that was fun.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. If you think about Jesus, when he came out of community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that this seed that is in us, we're meant to do this together. I think that's one of the things about COVID and being quarantined is how much we have missed that. And when you get together, and it is a way of bringing us back to the table together, watching this project.
Yeah.
SJ, as you shared that, how much gold is even not in the Rendezvous Project?
Yeah.
Like in the editing process. When you look at the Gospels, Jeff, it's not all the things. It's the things edited and trimmed down into the 25-minute chapter or the couple hours that takes you to read a book. But John makes it clear. If I wrote down everything, Apostle John says, there's no library that could contain all the things that he said and did. So
I was just reading that verse last night.
We're not quite on that level, right, Dana?
Yeah.
We're not quite that level, taking 50 and 55 minutes and bringing it into 30. But, there's so much more to be shared and said about marriage. But we believe, right, SJ, that this lends itself to a couple to moving in a direction.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff and Dana, there's clearly more to talk about. I think we got to do another episode.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to land this to my pilot friend, co-pilot to pilot. We got to land this because I want to talk about favorite sessions and some other things and open up a whole other lane of this. So let's wrap this up and just say that, hey, join us for part 2, friends and allies of the Exploring More podcast, the Rendezvous Project edition with Jeff and Dana Andrechyn. And I think you'll be encouraged when you do. So until next time.
If you've got questions or comments, listeners, please email us at exploringmore@zoe.org. And if you'd leave us a rate or a review on your podcast platform of choice, we'd sure appreciate it. It helps us to be found out there. So until next time, right, Michael?
Next time.
All right.
Keep exploring. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.